So you want me to tell you the story of my life?
Like I said, that's what I do. I interview people. I'm a collector of lives.
Welcome to Table Talk. I'm Heath, and I'll be your host. This is the show where I go one-on-one with a creator, author, illustrator, publisher, or other mover and shaker in the world of tabletop games, video games, TV, movies, or any other area of the geekverse.
You followed me here, didn't you?
Yeah, I suppose I did. You seem very interesting. This is where you live?
Yes, this is my home. Welcome.
So, what do you do?
I'm a vampire.
That's something I haven't heard before.
Guests have included individuals such as Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy novels, creator and publisher of the Norengard RPG, and even the author of Star Wars, A Pirate's Price.
Bond. James Bond.
Well, not James Bond. I haven't gotten to talk to him yet, but maybe sometime in the future. But how about Brian Cullen, the creator of the vast, grim, dark horror RPG and sculptor of the world of Revelo monster busts? Mark Tassin, the creator of the world of Italtus, head of Mechanical Muse, and the head developer of the new Cool Name RPG. I've spoken with Jeff Engelstein, game designer and former commentator on the Dice Tower. He and I got deep into the statistics, probability, and psychological function of dice in tabletop games. Jamie Stegmaier, the founder of Stonemaier Games and crowdfunder extraordinaire. He's published many hit board games like Scythe and Wingspan. I've spoken with Sydney Engelstein from Indie Boards and Cards to talk about what it really takes to publish a board game in today's environment and what it would take for you to get published if you were trying to get a publisher for your board game. I've spoken with Ajit George about game writing, education, and his contribution to Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft and his development of the Journey Through the Radiant Citadel Dungeons & Dragons book. Let's see, who else have I spoken to?
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard, the rightful heir to the throne, and the goddess of death.
Yes, I really appreciate her taking the time to speak with me. That was a great interview. I've also spoken with Cameron Pasha, a writer and novelist who's been working in Hollywood for over 20 years. His projects have included Emmy and Golden Globe nominated Sleeper Cell, Kings, Nikita, and Roswell, New Mexico. His analysis and commentary have been very popular on YouTube. I've gotten to speak with Paul Shadow, the former network executive, who has made quite a splash here on YouTube with his reaction videos to current movies and films. He and I discussed the status of independent film and web productions online today. Brianna De Silva is a reoccurring guest on the show, and a very popular one at that. She's an author and director, and she was also the co-writer of the cultist comedy web show that's here on the channel. She and I regularly meet to study and analyze stories. I've also gotten to speak with of the Positive Fandom channel. She's an ally in our effort to be a positive and constructive force in the geekverse. Are you ready? Have you got your drink? Are you all settled in? You might want to buckle up because it could be a wild ride. We're about to explore the worlds of tabletop gaming, sci-fi, fantasy, and the geekverse through the eyes of those who are making things happen.
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Roger. Ready to move out.
It's time for Table Talk. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Table Talk. Table Talk. Welcome to the office. Welcome to my home. I am your host tonight. I am Heath. And tonight we have a very special guest with us. His name is Ray Tesi. He is the owner of Neutral Zone Studios. I know that a lot of you saw where on the Heath's Geekverse channel where I did a tour of Neutral Zone Studios because it is a replica of the 1960s original Enterprise set that's in Kingsland, Georgia. Ray is the owner and operator of the set. So everyone, please welcome Ray. Welcome.
Thank you, Heath. I really appreciate you having me here. And hi, everybody.
I really appreciate your agreeing to come on and talk. I think that you're an ideal person to talk to because you are definitely, first of all, in the geekverse, the science fiction side of things, and on the creation side of things. So would you like to introduce yourself? Yeah, and let everybody know who you are?
I would be happy to. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So again, I'm Ray Tesi. I'm the owner of Neutral Zone Studios. If you're not familiar with the Neutral Zone, we are a full 10,000 square foot fan film soundstage. Our soundstage is patterned or based on the original blueprints from Desilu in 1966. And we have pretty much all of the sets that you would ever want if you were going to do a fan film. So we have the bridge, we have engineering, we have the transporter room, sick bay, briefing room, auxiliary control, captain's quarters, Jeffrey's tube. We have 100-foot corridor. And so we not only do fan films, and I'll talk maybe a little bit about that in a little while, Heath, about what we've done and what we've accomplished at the studio. But we also open the studio up, as Heath mentioned, to fans to come and walk through. And we give them a guided walkthrough. So we talk about old Star Trek, new Star Trek. We talk about what it is to make films. We talk about what it is to make a fan film, how it is the same or different. We talk about the construction of the studio. So we really try to go in depth for the fans. And it really is. And once those doors open and people see the corridor and the ship, what we tell people is you'll feel like a kid again. And quite honestly, we've had a lot of people laugh, cry, hug, gasp. It's really very interesting. But we are, in fact, a replica film studio of the original series.
Okay, so obviously Star Trek must be important to you personally to have taken this on. So what does Star Trek mean to you?
It is. Wow, that's a really interesting question. So I've been a fan since September 1966, which means in about 8 or 9 days, I'll have been watching Star Trek for 57 years. It's very interesting because once I saw Star Trek for the first time, I got hooked. And it almost becomes, it's not a cult. A lot of people think sometimes it's a cult or something like that. It's kind of a way of life, I guess is the best way to describe it. I mean, it's a positive depiction of the universe, what things should be or what things could be. And it's not a bad philosophy to try to follow. And in the early days, you were the nerd if you watched Star Trek. And now it's worldwide. In fact, during the walkthroughs, we say, I'll bet there isn't a place on Earth you can go to right now where someone doesn't know what beam me up means. So it's really been a part of my life. And, getting to be the owner of the studio is a crazy thing. If somebody had told 12-year-old Ray Tesi that one day he'd own the Enterprise, I'd say they were crazy. But here I am.
James has a question. He asks, is it laid out like the original Studio 2, like the room configuration and all?
It actually is, James. And I don't know that we have something we could show you. But if you see the walkthrough that Heath is doing, he's walking right down the corridor. The only two things that are different from the way it was laid out at Paramount is, number one, the engineering section is not in the same place. And that's because Paramount had 50,000 square feet. We have 10,000 square feet. So you have to pick your battles. So it's not where it should be, but it's just as impressive and just as tall. The second thing that's a little bit different is, even though we have sick bay, we don't have Dr. McCoy's quarters. And the reason for that is no fan film ever needed Dr. McCoy's quarters. And you don't have to build something if you're never going to use it. And that area becomes very valuable real estate, because at some point you will have to build a set or a prop that you're going to need for an episode that you didn't have, even if it's temporary. And so you need a work area. So those are the only two differences. But when you walk down the corridor, you're walking down the same footprint as the original soundstage.
James says that's pretty dang cool. Did you have blueprints to work from, or was it eyeballed? Either way, it's an incredible feat.
Well, that's also a great question. So it's all eyeballed off of the blueprints. Blueprints exist everywhere online. Uh, Go to any search engine, and you can find the blueprints. Um, in fact, behind the bridge, which people can't really see, is I think a 4 foot by 4 foot blueprint of the bridge, and that's what that was based on. But the blueprint to the layout is exactly the same. We didn't have as much room, so we had to take some liberties on what we could and couldn't recreate. And I say we, but I want to talk about the people who actually did it. I'm the caretaker these days, but we have to pick and choose what we can do. But if you walk down it, you'll know exactly where you are and where your bets, as you can see in Heath's walkthrough, they're iconic. They're just very iconic.
What is the best part of operating this facility?
You know what? We've had probably thousands of fans come through since I reopened it in 2018. Just very briefly, it started at another facility in 2010 by a group called Starship Farragut. And Farragut and Vic Mignogna collaborated, and then Vic built out most of the sets that you see and created Star Trek Continues. So those are two series that you should probably take a look at. And I became the owner in 2018. And I think the look and the reaction by fans, it's something that I don't think people expect to see in their lifetime, at least not walk into it. It's not a television. You can actually go sit in the captain's chair. You can stand on the transporter. And we're very open. We let people, take pictures and sit in seats. You got to be careful because they're sets. And some of them are a little fragile, but that's okay. But I have been, and I don't know of any other word, Heath, than humbled by the reaction that people give me at the end of a walkthrough. And, the things they say. And, to watch somebody get very emotional is a real big thing. And I think, to me, films are great, but the fans and the fan reactions is, to me, what really drives me to keep things going.
Were you a part of Star Trek Continues?
I was not. I am the late bloomer. I was a fan of Star Trek Continues, and I had actually done a fan film at a facility that's no longer around, Starbase Studios, which was in Oklahoma. And I had met Vic a few times at conventions and emailed him a little bit now and then. And in 2017, Continues stopped filming. And I found out about that. That was in February. I found out about it in October. And I wrote Vic saying, hey, what are you going to do with the sets now that you're done? Because I thought maybe I could get sets and build up Starbase Studios. And so I wrote Vic, and that's all I said. What are you doing now? And I didn't expect to get an answer. And Heath, as they say, later that same day, I get a message back from Vic. And all it says is, what do you have in mind? And, being a business person for a million years, you could probably tell by the color of my hair, you come up with like 3 or 4 different ideas. And so I sent it back to him. And again, and in the email, when I sent it back, I said, here's 4 ideas or 3 ideas that I have. And hey, if you ever want to talk to me, here's my phone number. And as they say, Heath, later that desk at work and the phone rings and I answer the phone and the voice says, hey, it's Vic. How you doing? And I had no words. I just had no words. But for 45 minutes or thereabouts, we talked about Star Trek, not Star Trek Continues, not the studio, Star Trek, old Trek, new Trek, conventions. We kind of compared notes where we passed each other at cons and didn't even realize it. Really kind of like real Star Trek nerds talking. I've got to be honest. And at the very end of the conversation, he said, hey, would you like to see the studio? I was like, I lives out, but I was like, oh yeah, I want to come see it. And so he invited me to come see the studio. And I had no words. When I walked in, yeah, I felt like I was 12. I had no idea that it could be real. And we reached a deal, and I purchased the studio from Vic in early 2018. It took me about 5 months to be able to get in touch with CBS at the time. Now they're really Paramount. They've all consolidated under Paramount. Open it until I was able to tell them, hey, I own this, and here's what I'd like to do. And we went back and forth, and honestly, for 6 years, they've let me play in their sandbox.
Well, so what type? That's an excellent route to pursue, since that came up now. What type of relationship do you have with Paramount then? So they're aware of you. Do they come and talk to you? How often do you talk to people on the business side?
They are aware of me. Well, the good news is they have nothing to talk to me about most of the time. To touch base. I know they're watching me. I know they're watching everybody. Anybody who does fan films, they're watching. And I guess in a word, I think I have a good relationship with Paramount. And in those few occasions where we've talked, we go from, business to Strange New Worlds. And we talk about episodes and we compare our own notes as fans. And so I think it's a good working relationship.
Brett asks, how much would you say? 10,000 square feet? How many square feet does this set take up?
It's honestly, it's 9,650 square feet. 9,650.
So were you said you were a part of business. Like, what is it that you do? You said you were a businessman. Were you part of television or film as part of your business? Or is this purely a hobby kind of interest?
No, I've been in IT for a million years. So that's always kept me going. That's still my day job. So Star Trek I can't quite call it a hobby. And the studio is not really a hobby. The studio is not a business, but I have to run it like a business. It's a not-for-profit. We ask for donations when people come in. It's not obligatory. We don't turn anyone away. But you have to run it like a business because it has to be up as people come in. So it's not quite a hobby and it's not quite a business, but it's some hybrid in there.
If somebody wanted to get involved, how do they get involved with doing something at Neutral Zone Studios, being a part of this incredible thing that exists?
Well, there's a phrase in Star Trek: infinite diversity and infinite combinations. Okay. Um, it's really about camaraderie. And so I can't speak for any other studio than the Neutral Zone. But when people come in the door or people write, if they want to be in a fan film, right? So the walkthroughs are open to anybody. And it's easy. You go to our website, neutralzonestudios.com. There's a calendar. You pick a day, you pick a time, you sign up. That's it. That's it. Fan films are a bit of a different thing because you've got planning, you've got to work it out, you've got actors, you've got extras, and then you've got crew. You've got the producer and the director and the director of photography and the gaffer who does the lights and audio. You need a lot of people that are like gophers who have to move things around, move sets around. You have to relight things. But I feel that if anybody wants to be in a production, whether it's in front of or behind the camera, and even people who just want to see how it's done. Okay, here's a date. Here's when we're filming next. Just come on up, tell me you're coming, sign a waiver or an NDA, and you're in. That's it. I think one of the best examples I can give you is we have about 6 or 7 films now as Tales from the Neutral Zone on YouTube. And we're about to release in the next couple of weeks our latest, which I feel is probably one of our best, but be that as it may. But one of the films we have out there is called When Duty Calls. And I'm big on things like crossovers and prequels and things like that. And I came up with an idea, a story, about a crossover between the original series and Discovery. Who's done that? Nobody's done that. And the reason I came up with it was we were doing a fan weekend and 2 women came in dressed in Discovery costuming. And one was the perfect Burnham and the other one was the perfect Tilly. And I said, I'm going to put you guys in a fan film. And they were like, yeah, okay, I get it. And I wrote a story in 3 or 4 weeks, scheduled it out. I think we filmed like 4 months later after we got cast and crew and whatever. And I'm really proud of it. But these were 2 women that walked in off the street.
How often are fan films being shot there?
Quite often, but not as often as I'd like. I can say that. And the reason is a lot of people inquire but don't have a full script. And that's the first thing you need is a treatment or a script. And people think, they'll call up and say, hey, I have a story, I want to do it. And you have any time next week? Well, that's not how it works. It needs pre-planning. It needs budgeting, right? Exactly. Well, who's your crew? What do you need? Do you need cameras? Are you bringing your own equipment? So people don't quite understand. But there are several productions that film on a regular basis. Tales from the Neutral Zone is one. We're shooting 3 episodes in spring next year. We've got Dreadnought Dominion coming. They've done, I don't know how many episodes, 20 maybe, since they've been in the studio. And they're coming in about a month or so. We have another group that's a STEM group, a school group, but they do demo videos for their staff. And they use the Neutral Zone and Star Trek to get their message across. And we have about 3 or 4 others that are scheduled, but they're the one-timers. They're the independent productions.
Well, I'm going to put the web link up there on the screen for a moment as well. So neutralzonestudios.com, where this is the place to go as a central hub for all of this.
Yes.
But that is up there.
Studios.com.
Yeah, take us through you talked about what it takes to do a production there, because I've done independent film production. I've done 2 seasons of a web series that I would love to come and film, but it's one of those things I've thought about. But if you've got somebody out there who is thinking about doing this, because like I said, we've got a lot of very creative people who watch this and who like to do things, whether that's games or books, but also things like movies or television production or YouTube production. What do you need to know if you're thinking about producing some type of web show and you'd like to do it at Neutral Zone Studios? What is that like?
Okay. So at the top, whoever has this idea that they want to do a film, you have to understand that it's your production. You can get all the help you want, you can get studio time, but it's your production. So you need to scope out everything there is. So at the top of it, you need a story, but you need a real script. The one thing I recommend if you're doing a Star Trek fan film, in fact, I don't recommend it, I insist on it, is CBS Paramount has Star Trek fan film guidelines. And the guidelines are forward and pretty easy to use. And, you just follow the rules and you're safe. And they're not rules, they're guidelines. So there's very few things that will stop you, but they even allow you to crowdfund up to $50,000. I mean, nobody's going to reach that, but you can get funding for your film. But once that's done, you need to talk to someone like me, who's a studio owner, to say, well, what do you need? Let me see your story so I know what sets you're going to want to use. What do you need? Do you need cameramen? Do you need a director? Do you need a cast? Do you need a crew? And, lots of like extras, the people who just get in costume and walk around, they just love doing that. So, costs can vary, but a lot of it is at no charge. But then you have to do pre-planning. You've got to get your crew together. You've got to do a table read, even if it's online on Zoom. You've got to do a table read. Make sure your actors are right for what you want them to play. Then you have to budget. And people don't realize that there's travel, there's gas, there's hotels. One thing people don't even think about is food. You're working all day and your cast will come up to you and say, hey, I'm pretty hungry. And that's when you realize you need food. So there's a lot of expenses that go with it, but that has to be borne by the person whose production it is. And then you need to chart out how much time you need. You got to give yourself several months before you could actually go to film. And then you need to come up with a shooting schedule or a shooting script, which is, let's say you've got 20 actors. Forget the background crew or the film crew. You've got 20 actors. Well, maybe you only need 7 of those actors on day one. You don't need the other 13 people sitting around doing nothing. So you try to chart it out so you give the people a real fighting chance to come in and, play in Star Trek. And then you've got to think that you've got the back end. It takes a long time, especially in fan films, because most of us have day jobs. So you need the editor at the end. You need a visual effects guy to do your exteriors. Sometimes they need to do interior shots and effects. You have your sound guy. You have your editors taking care of lighting. And so it could be several more months from the time you finish to the time you release. So you, as the producer, have to have a lot of patience.
Zero the Blade asks, have people come to visit to get help with the script that they're writing?
They can. Nobody's going to turn anybody away. The thing it starts with is called a treatment. And if you're not familiar with a treatment, it's a very short 1 or 2 page rough outline of what you think your story is going to be. It doesn't go into detail. You don't have to say the captain leaves his quarters and heads down to the turbo lift, and he ends up on the bridge. You don't have to go into that. What's your story about? That's the place to start. And then really, it's up to you to at least start the dialogue. And there are plenty of us who read stories and can make them tighter, can make them, flow better. We can certainly do that. But we're busy writing our own scripts of things we want to do. So usually that script comes to us in an almost ready format. And if you are writing a script, just to go one step further, so the guidelines from CBS Paramount are you can do a 15-minute episode or 2 15-minute episodes, which means you can do up to 30 minutes. If you put it in a script format, there's a lot of software out there that actually does format it correctly in a script format. The general rule of thumb is 1 page equals 1 minute. So a 15-minute story should be somewhere between maybe 13 and 18 or 19 pages. If you write 47 pages, it's just going to be too long. So just that's something to keep in mind.
But you can also help on the technical side of things. It sounded like if you've got the script and you're coming in, but you're talking about lighting, or do you need cameramen or camera women or what? But the technical crew, you have contacts there who can help with the technical side of things behind the scenes. Once you think
we have a lot of local people between Southern Georgia and Jacksonville. A lot of film groups out there. We have a full set of lights. So whoever's coming for the production, the lights are already there. And our gaffer, we sit with generally the person whose production it is, myself as maybe a producer or a line producer, and the director of photography. And we say, okay, looking at their vision, how do you view this scene to be filmed? So you set up the camera and you lock it in place. And then your gaffer and that little crew decide, I want blue light on that wall. I want shadows over here. I want to put my security guard in this spot. And it's something else to talk about that people don't maybe understand. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But you align the shot, then you light the shot. And once you're satisfied, then you go to film. And that doesn't take very long. But again, that production person needs patience. The thing that they also need to know, which was something that when I shot my first film over at Starbase in Oklahoma, Starship Republic, I was green. I had no knowledge. And, I worked with a guy who taught me a lot. And he became I was the director. And then I said, you're the director. And he did it. And he was also director of photography. And the one thing I didn't realize, and why it takes so long to make a film, is, you set up your camera, you do a wide shot, which they call the master shot. I can explain what that is in a minute if people want to know. But you have your wide shot and you film your scene. Well, then all of a sudden your cameraman is breaking it down. Let's get a close up of the comm officer. We got to go over there and get the captain. Now we got to turn around and get the captain and the science officer in the same shot. Now we got to go get the helmsman. Now we got to go get the navigator. And all of a sudden, one scene could be 50 different shots from 10 or 12 different angles. So it takes a long time to break down. You may even need to change things around. I said, we shot a scene that was in sickbay. And we had the actor set up. We had one of our people on the bio bed. and we positioned our security guard against the back wall. And when we moved the camera to get the shot that we wanted as close up, the security guard disappeared. He was hiding behind somebody. So you move, you think, okay, that's going to break continuity. Nobody notices. Nobody knew that guard moved 5 feet from the left to the right. So you're constantly looking through the camera to make sure you've got one shot.
James asks, I noticed, do you ever let people just hang out on the set in silence for inspiration, sitting in the chair and engineering with a laptop and just write?
Well, I'm not opposed to it. I don't think anybody's ever asked me to do that. But you know what? Somebody's got to be there. So it's not that I could just let somebody sit there and do their thing. It should be part of something else. If you want to come, and I have no opposition to this, James, if you wanted to come, and I don't know if you're a filmmaker, I don't know if you have experience, but let's say you want to come and you want to do that. You want to sit in the captain's chair and you're right. Well, you come during a production. And while they're filming and engineering, or they're filming in the transporter room, and the bridge is not being used, sit in the captain's chair and write.
James says, of course, I wouldn't ask for unchaperoned occupation. Barry also has a great question here. He says, on average, how many days does it take to shoot an average 15-minute fan film? Now, I'm sure this is going to vary, but depending on your complexity level. But that's a good question. In general, if you end up with a 15-minute script, a 15-page script like that, how many days worth of production do you need to plan for?
So and you're right, it does vary. It varies with the number of actors. It varies with the number of sets that you're going to use, because each set, once you're done in a set, you have to break down the lighting. You have to go light another set. So it does vary. However, and I'll say this on the upfront, it's really dependent on how well your cast knows their dialogue. Okay? They may not be good actors, and that's okay. That's why you have a director. So most films, 15 minutes, will get shot in anywhere from 2 to 4 days. It's not a week. It's not 2 weeks, because people don't have time. People are taking time off from work to have fun. So you try to do it efficiently. And, the people who are in the studio who have done these, myself included, know how to move people around. Okay. Time's a wasting. The last thing you want to do is waste time. So if you don't have a complicated script, if you're only shooting on maybe 2 or 3 sets, but your crew knows their dialogue, they're ready to go, and that's why you do table reads to make sure, then you can probably do it in 2 days, maybe 2.5 days.
Yeah, I was thinking about the number of sets necessary, because, of course, you've got this entire complex. But if you're trying to write a 15-minute script, it could be what you could be tempted to say, all right, I got 15 minutes. I want to have engineering, and I want to have sick bay. And of course I want to have the bridge, and I want to show somebody's quarters. So you start dividing up how many pages of script are going to go in each one of these locations. And if you could do this in 2 or 1 or 3, that's probably good. That way you don't have to spend so much time moving, resetting up. The more stuff you could shoot on the bridge. And you might even think about, like, does this scene have to be in the quarters? Could they just go off to the side of the bridge and say this? That kind of thing is going to speed you up.
Right. So things are not filmed in sequence. You've got day one, let's say, you're shooting all the scenes on the bridge. And one could be an opening shot, one could be a middle shot, one could be a closing shot. Okay, so you're not You're not moving from the bridge to sickbay because that's the next scene. You're in sickbay the next day or later that day, and you're shooting everything in sickbay. And yeah, it can get complicated, but you know what? It doesn't mean you can't have snippets within sets. Like if you want to show your captain beaming in and running out of the transporter room, fine, set that up. That's probably a quick shot, a couple of different angles, and you're done. But now all of a sudden you filmed in the transporter room.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point about the organization of the scripting and the scheduling, that once you've got the script laid out, the scheduling is, don't shoot it in order. We've got to make sure that we spend our time efficiently to make sure that all of the scenes in any particular set are already done all together. And that's an advantage of Star Trek, because probably all of your crew are uniformed. So you don't actually have to worry about them being in different uniforms, like on different days, or, they're going to be over here, so they got to be in a different uniform or a different outfit or different clothing. They're Starfleet uniforms. That makes it very easy to go between different locations or shoot things out of sequence, because they're always in a uniform anyway. If things are on different days, you got to change clothing. That also gets complicated.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And you put it in the costuming department, and okay, this is Heath's tunic, and this is Ray's tunic, and this is Tina's tunic. And when they come in the following day, their costumes that they wore previously are marked. Costuming is another thing. Now we have a lot of costumes at the studio. But sometimes costumes don't fit in the particular rank that somebody wants. So we'll have to alter the costume. So allow time for, a costumer to work and make a costume fit an actor properly.
Let's see. So we talked about how people get involved. Well, okay, so let's talk about Star Trek in general then. What do you think is the state of sci-fi or Star Trek today? Do you think it's in a good position? Do you think it's a bad position? How does that relate to the professionally produced Star Trek, as well as fan films and the community around it?
Well, fan films have been around. Let's talk about fan films. Fan films have been around a long time. I once sat down, Heath, honestly, to try to figure out how many fan films, Star Trek fan films, have been filmed, are out there on like YouTube. And they're done by many, many different production companies, and it's global. There are people in the UK. There are people in Germany. There are people in, I forget where they are, but there's another group out there. And we kind of talk to each other. All the producers or other production people talk to each other. And I stopped somewhere just short of 2,000. 2,000.
Wow.
Some of them are 5 minutes long. Other ones, older ones, are 45 minutes or an hour. But there's like 2,000. And if you think about it, there's a bunch of Star Wars fan films out there, but what, hundreds, maybe? So Star Trek has been very prolific. And somebody asked me once why I thought that was. And I said, you know what? Star Trek allows people to express themselves and tell their story in a medium and a format that they don't like, that they love, and they can kind of hide behind these characters and tell a story. And so fan films are very important to the fan community. Talking about regular Star Trek kind of languished for a number of years after, for example, Star Trek Enterprise was canceled. And there was no new Star Trek on television. And you had some TNG movies come out periodically. And only in 2009 did Star Trek kind of get a reboot with the Chris Pine Zachary Quinto movies, and that got some interest back in Star Trek. But I'm pleased with most of what CBS Studios is doing with their productions on Paramount Plus. And I am a big fan of Strange New Worlds. It's not my Star Trek. Some people hate it because it's not Star Trek, but it is Star Trek, and it's bringing new audiences to the world of Trek. I watched 3 seasons of Picard. I thought season 1 was good. I thought season 2 was okay. I thought season 3 was one of the best series I'd ever seen. Discovery, I have a little problem with. If I were the author of Discovery, after episode 1, season 1, Michael Burnham would have been in the brig and never seen again because she's always violating everything. But that's me. But I think Star Trek has made a resurgence, and it's kind of split the community, which is very interesting. But hey, if it's Star Trek, right, that's my philosophy.
Well, you kind of touched on this, but why do you think that Star Trek is so important and has endured for so long? I mean, you're talking about, we're talking 50 years of Star Trek. It's still here, and it's still very important to people. And as you said, there can be a tremendous emotional impact on people when they walk on the set at Neutral Zone Studios. It was for me. It was really neat also seeing a lot of other people who were there, who come in costume, who come in uniform, and walk on, and they have this huge emotional impact. What is it about Star Trek that does that? Oh, did we freeze? Uh-oh. I know we were having a little bit of trouble. We might have to...
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. Are you okay? I can hear you. I can see you.
I can hear you. Yeah, you cut out for a little bit there, but I think you may be back.
Okay. To answer your question again, if it didn't come through, I don't think there's one formulated answer to answer the question. I think Star Trek means something to everyone individually, whether it's a belief, a feeling, what makes people like Klingons as opposed to Andorians, or what's wrong with the Federation, or why do people love Spock and not Kirk? Why do people love certain stories? It's a feeling that Star Trek, and we go back to Gene Roddenberry, the creator, who had this vision of what the future was hopefully going to look like. And I think we all strive, especially in the world today, where there's so much tension and there's so much on the edge between, countries and this planet. And here we are trying to reach for Mars now, go back to the moon. There's a real positive look to Star Trek. You can love Star Wars, and I do. I love Star Wars, okay? But Star Wars is all action adventure. It's shoot 'em up, bang 'em up, blow 'em up, you have, the Empire and the Rebels in Star Wars, but you have the Klingons and the Federation and other races that are at odds in Star Trek, but somehow they manage to get along in Star Trek. And I think there's a philosophy in there that connects with people on different levels. So I don't know that there's an answer, but I know that it invokes deep emotions in people, not just some emotions, deep emotions. And I've seen it firsthand. I originally, the first couple of years, I had taken the bridge sets on the road. I've been to a couple of local or, Florida and Georgia conventions. And I was never prepared for the reaction that people got when they came face to face with it. And to ever think that you as a person could sit in the captain's chair and look at the main view screen. The other thing that some people sometimes say, and actually, we've had some of the Star Trek Continues cast, and Chris Doohan, who's the son of Jimmy Doohan, who played the original Scotty. Chris Doohan played Scotty in Star Trek Continues. And I remember him telling a story to a group because he came to the studio and he was part of the walkthrough. And he said he came out of the turbo lift onto the bridge. This was when he was first filming, not that day, but when he was first filming. And the doors opened and he cried. He cried because he could see what his father was seeing when his father filmed it. So it's something different to groups of people. Can't say everybody has a different emotion, but groups of people have different emotions.
A friend of mine was surprised when I brought back pictures and posted them on Facebook that people were allowed to be in uniform at the wear a uniform to hang out at Neutral Zone Studios. And I guess that's because if you're on set, because he was a writer for science fiction magazines, and so had been on the actual production sets of different things out in California. And I think if you take tours there, it must be that if you take tours there, you can't come in uniform because they don't want you taking pictures that's as if you were on Star Trek or something like that. But that's not the case at Neutral Zone Studios. There are lots of people who came in uniform, and you encourage that, right?
There's a line that I put in a lot of our advertisements. Come as you are or who you want to be. And I mean, we get stormtroopers coming through and Wookiees. It doesn't matter. When you get somebody who's non-Star Trek, I always say, okay, we're non-denominational. You guys can come in. It's okay. People want to play the part. I mean, this is probably for many people a once in a lifetime experience. And if they've always imagined being on set or being on the ship as if the ship was real, and they want to come in a costume or a tunic or a uniform, doesn't matter. Just do it. I had a guy come dressed as a Mugatu. If you remember the Mugatu, it was the white gorilla that was in, can't remember the episode, but they were on a planet with Tyree, and the Klingons were arming one side, and they got attacked by this Mugatu, which is like a white gorilla. Guy came dressed as a Mugatu. Okay.
They had like the unicorn on the head, right? I think it might, if I'm thinking about the right thing.
Yes.
Okay,
and he had the unicorn on his head.
Well, where do you want Neutral Stone Studios to go? Where are you headed with it? What are your plans going forward? Are there for you and the studios?
Well, we have a few things in the works. Don't want to jinx myself just yet, but September 23rd and 24th, we start up fan appreciation weekends again, and we're running through at least through May. We do it normally once a month because we're all volunteer based, so it's hard to get people more than 1 weekend a month. But we're talking about doing maybe a second one. We might see that in October or November and start there. We're working with someone. There's a train ride in the area, and a legit train ride, and they do shows. And so we're working with that group on something called the Sci-Fi Express. And we're going to have some sort of train, Star Trek based. But there's a lot of potential in what we're doing. The biggest thing is we want people to come and see it. There's probably hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of Star Trek fans in the world. And this is there for them. And that's what we're asking. Just come on and play in our sandbox.
When I did my visit there, it was being spoken about that there was going to be a wall removed in order to create a more authentic set for engineering or something like that. Is that still going on? Is there an update over there?
Yeah. So the other side of the building for many years was an egg roll factory. And the egg roll factory moved out. And what they left in their wake was egg roll factory leavings. So it took a long time to clean it out. But that wall that's on the right side of engineering was a dividing wall between us and that group. And that wall has come down. And actually, before Fan Week opens, that wall will be completely open. And it will extend engineering. And really, the purpose of that is for filming. It'll open it up and give it a lot of airspace. But that's where you would have your cameras, your producer, your director, your actors waiting to get on set. And so that becomes a big, wide open area. At some point, we may extend engineering. But right now, we want the wall down so people can feel that real open space that you would if you were in a film studio.
Right. And for people who might be wondering what we're talking about exactly, if when you're in there just walking around in engineering, you don't necessarily feel that because it looks like engineering. But the wall that is opposite, there's a wall opposite the wall where you climb up on the ladder and go up to the second level. But that wall shouldn't actually be there. And that way you can put the cameras and such like you're talking about and shoot wide shots into engineering. Otherwise, I can see if you're actually planning out a shot in there, it's probably a bit cramped because you have to put basically the cameras on the stage right now.
Well, as Vic says when he does the walkthrough, you can't film the set. Yeah, you can't film the set if you're in the set. So it becomes different. You know what? And that brings up another point, is that many of the sets have what's called a wild wall, meaning when you're filming, that wall comes out and the camera goes opposite the set or adjacent to the set. So now you can see the entire set, whereas you would be butt up against the wall if you were inside.
And I think there are even places that open up just to put a camera in general. Like I'm thinking about, wasn't that the case in the crew quarters? So if you're trying to get like a close up of somebody working at the desk.
Yep. Yeah. The crew quarters are very cramped. So it's hard to get actors and, you know, your director and whatever, and a camera in that little space. And I always use the example in the original series, Captain be sitting at his desk and the buzzer in the door would go off and he'd say, come in. And the door would open and there's this great shot of Spock or McCoy or whomever. Nice close up. Well, you can't get that if you're standing 3 feet away from them. So there's a little, what we would call a puka, right? Which is a little hiding space. And you just have something covering a hole in the wall. And you take that off and you put the camera behind the wall and you've got this beautiful shot of your actors. And it's unbelievable how it looks on film.
You don't think about that when you're watching it, that you're watching it from outside because you think you're there. But that's the difference between building a set and building, you know, the actual Starship Enterprise or something like that. You've got the set that is ready for production.
Correct. One day we want to film an episode that takes place because the Enterprise is supposed to have bowling alleys.
We talked about that, I think, on the episode where the episode of the Morning Grind live stream where I showed the videos that I had done, and then we took a look at, I don't have them sitting here, but the plans from 1975 that has the pool and the bowling alley, and we talked about the bowling alley being in there. So yes, you could do an off location or on location set at a bowling alley and show that finally.
Sure. And everybody's in uniform. Everybody's in uniform. And you know where that comes from, because that's the interesting thing about Star Trek is people will take like one line and run with it. And in The Naked Time, Kevin Riley, who's like drunk, has locked himself in engineering, and he's on the speaker going throughout the ship. And he says, there will be a meeting in the bowling alley at 1700 hours. Was there a bowling alley? We don't know.
But there's also a lot of space on that ship. We were also talking about that. The whole pool, the recreation deck, the bowling alley. You got it much better than a submarine does in World War II, if you're on board the Enterprise.
Yeah, it's very true. By the way, what don't they have on a starship? Have you ever seen anybody go to the bathroom?
Well, they've got in the plans. It had
We just
the
think
head,
they launch it out into space. That's a personal opinion.
the beam it out, right? Yes. Well, what else do we need to say about Neutral Zone Studios, or what else is going on, or with you? Is there something else that we haven't covered that we should?
I want to talk about that.
Okay.
But I want to give everybody a factoid that most people don't know. And I didn't know it until about 2 years ago. And it's about the briefing room. And the question I'll ask, and then I'll answer it right away, but the question I'll ask is, has anybody ever wondered why the briefing room table is so funky? Why is it shaped in such a funky shape? You've got Spock sitting in a corner. You've got angled Kirk sitting next to him, a couple of people. Then it gets a cut. Then it goes sideways. And there's like 4 people sitting over here. It's all angled. I don't know if anybody else has ever wondered why it was so funky. I always did and thought it was a great design. The answer is Gene Roddenberry said that Star Trek was based on the Navy. And if you think about it, starships are named after, naval vessels, the Enterprise, the Yorktown, the Constitution. And if you think a little further, Star Trek 1966 is about 20 years removed from World War II. Whoever came up with the idea, that table is the top of an aircraft carrier.
Oh, Barry got it. No, Tomocrat says I thought it was weird.
Barry, you're smart. Barry, you win the award.
I learned that on the tour.
Somebody just said they thought it was just weird.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of that too.
Yeah. That's an interesting factoid. I pass that along whenever I can. So, what's going on with the neutral zone, what's going on with me, all that good stuff, right? So, fan weekends, as I mentioned, are coming back September 23rd, 24th, coming back strong. We changed format after COVID, and we've kind of opened things up a bit. No, you're showing our website. That's great. Yep. That's wonderful. More fan films coming, more production companies coming. We do work all the time to try to fix and augment what we do, but honestly, we want to be open more during the season, and that's why we're thinking about putting on a second fan weekend, maybe in a different format. And the second one, we actually are talking about making it an open house rather than a walkthrough, with a guided walkthrough. so people could just kind of come in and wander and see the sets and sit where they want and, you know, do whatever they want. Not whatever they want to do, but, you know, within reason. Um, and so that's all coming up in short order, you know, very short order. The biggest thing that I would like to ask everybody watching, two things. First of all, please spread the word. Please let people know that we're here. I can't tell you how disheartening it is when somebody who lived 3 blocks away from us in Kingsland said, I've lived here all my life and I never knew that you guys were here. That's terrible. That's terrible. So spread the word. But the other thing is, Neutral Zone is not for profit. And I'm going to put a plug in here, if I may. We are not for profit. We run lean and mean. All my attempts, the landlord wants rent every month. There's utilities to pay. Things need repair. So anything you can help us with as a contribution or a donation is appreciated. And we have something called a Patreon page
right here.
And if you're not familiar with Patreon, Patreon is a pledge that you'll make a donation every month. And their Patreon, Heath has it up on the screen. And you know what? Whatever you can afford. A cup of coffee costs you $5. If you pledge $5 a month, you wouldn't miss that cup of coffee. We're just looking to stay alive. We want to keep the lights on. That's the goal, is to keep the lights on. And there's a lot of things that take place behind the scenes to just keep this up and running and keep the upkeep of the studio in a condition that people will come in and just be wowed and floored. So if you can help, it is tremendously appreciated.
I also just posted the link to the Patreon page in the comments there. James asked, do you have any press materials or have you ever gotten any flyers made up? I work at the biggest toy store in the Midwest. I'd love to have some distributables to pass out to customers.
James, what you want to do is send me an email, Ray at neutralzonestudios.com, and I will flood you with material that you can give out.
Tom McRae, this is an interesting question. How fragile are the sets? I know we saw some construction pictures going by.
So the sets themselves are not very fragile. It's plywood. The walls are plywood. So plywood is pretty hard. I mean, you can dent it, you can scratch it, you then can fix it. It's the set pieces that can be fragile. So, for example, Spock's scanner, right? You always see Spock turning the little handle if I'm here, right? Spock's looking in here and he's turning the handle down here. Well, that handle can fall off, you know, just because of what it is. And you wouldn't know that, for example, the Sulu scope that Sulu looks in. Well, just like regular 24th century technology, it's run by a 9-volt battery. So eventually that runs out. And things can break. Things are not really made. Pushing buttons. People like to push buttons. Well, buttons cost a lot of money. So, you know, they'll eventually, you know, a button will wear out. You know, the rocker switches will wear out. So they're not terribly fragile, but we always start by saying, please respect the sets and the set pieces. That's all we ask.
All right. Well, Ray, thank you so much for being here tonight. I have had a fantastic time talking to you, and I think it seems like the community has as well. And I think we've had a fantastic conversation here tonight.
Thank you. And Heath, again, I appreciate you having me beam over. And you know, everybody who's listening, I thank you guys for tuning in. Come visit us. We would just love you to see this thing. I mean, Heath has talked about it. He was there, and you can see his reaction, and he took plenty of film. So take pictures, take videos, post them on social, tag us, Pound Neutral Zone Studios. I always say to people, make your family and friends, envious that they weren't here with you today.
Well, there were a lot of people who were envious after I started posting things too. So yes, that definitely happens when you're posting pictures on social media after a set visit. Absolutely. All right. Well, just hang with me, Ray. I'll talk to you on the other side of this, on the other side once we're off air. But I think we should wrap up here. Thank you, everybody, for coming by who has been part of this. Thank you, everybody who's been watching live. Thank you to everybody who comes by and also watches on replay. It has been fantastic. I will see everybody soon for another Table Talk Tuesday night at 7 p.m., but also on the Heath's Geekverse channel. I'm live every morning at 9:30 for the morning grind. We talk about topics in geekdom and gaming, lots of stuff about RPGs and games. So I'll be live on the Heath's Geekverse channel at 9:30 a.m. in the morning. Thank you so much, Ray. Bye, everybody.